All of the symbols have one source, and today I'm going to tell you how and why. Keep watching. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It's another brand new episode. It's a fantastic episode. It's a subject that's really close to my heart, so I'm really excited to getting into it. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, let's get into the presentation. So here we are. Today's subject of discussion is symbology. Now, I'm really curious about symbology, and I love archaeology, and I always love to find out, to dig into all of these resources, what is here, what is there. So I'm the kind of guy that will explain to you how it is all connected. And today we're going to do that in this episode. And in this image that you see here to my left, to your right, it gives a perspective of how our symbology all connects to one source. So you see on the left you see the western side, and on the right you see the eastern side. And you can see on the right, well, those people kind of kept it together. And yeah, on the left it's all kind of different invasions and all of those things, which is why there was a lot of transformation happening and a lot of wisdom has gone lost. And today we're going to figure out how and why that is. All right, so let's dig into it. First is that we have to understand that the key to unlocking these symbols is hidden in the fabric of reality. So first we have to understand reality a little bit better. And once we understand reality, we can have a better understanding of how it all connects together. And to understand reality, we're going to have to get into a little bit of physics. And I know. There's a lot of people who are now clicking away because they're thinking, physics, I don't want to do physics. Yeah, well, don't worry, it's not going to be a lot. It's not going to hurt too much. Stick around. All right, let's go into it. So we need to get to Nassim Harameins' unified field theory, because it is revolutionary in that sense that he has unified the macrocosmos and the microcosmos. And the way that he did that is by taking classical physics and connecting it to quantum physics, which are basically, in modern science, they're not related in any way or form. So, you know, we got all the big stuff, which are all spheres, and then we got all the small stuff down there, which are also small spheres, but we have completely separate theories for both of them. By the way, this is also, if you're talking to a flat earther, this is the best line of reasoning of why the earth is not flat. If everything above us is spheres and everything down in the smaller stuff is spheres, then surely the earth is going to be a sphere. All right, so if you can get around that concept and you can understand that everything is interrelated to each other and the universe only follows the same patterns, then if for those of you who have been paying attention to our leader, that is everything in our reality. And Nassim Harameins' theory is basically the best solution that we have so far in understanding of how it is all interconnected, right? There's a couple of things that are important with this, and so it gives us an understanding of space and time. So having space and time, all of us together with spheres, and then understanding how those spheres move around. So if we have little spheres in our universe, that means that the universe must have little pixels. And that pixel is called a Planck sphere. And so a Planck sphere is kind of like the smallest unit of measurement that you can have to understand the proton, to understand an electron, and to understand all of the things that it shapes around us, to understand gravity and all of these other things. All right, so it's a big theory. We're not going to dive into it too much, but we're going to just, do the fun stuff, look at all the pretty pictures and stuff. So we have these pixels They're called Planck spheres, and the most exciting thing about this is that the ancients, they knew about it. All right, so let's have a look. So we have the Planck Pixel, and the Planck Pixel is basically, it's a little sphere, and it fits into the proton in this way that it fills up the entire size by just having all these little pixels dotted into them together. And it does the same thing with the electron, but it does it in a different way. So here you can see a way of how those two are connected. And there you have the fundamental principle. So basically you have the sphere and the line, you have the dot and the dash, or the 1 and the 0, however you want. There's a binary way of how our universe creates a different system, which is then the toroidal field. So here you can see it. So you have the electron spinning around the proton, and there you get a toroidal field. And the toroidal field then creates a gravitational polarity. So then what you get is you get a gravitational pull, and that's where magnetism comes in line, because all of a sudden you have a plus and you have a minus, right? That's a good understanding of thinking about what our universe does on the smallest level. And then also you can extrapolate. So you can extrapolate from it how the universe works on the bigger stuff, right? All right, so this is important. So if you can get to understand this, we're a long way. All right, so you have the dot, you have the dash, you have the field, and then you have the plus and the minus. All right, so we have the microcosmos and the macrocosmos. What does that mean? That means that if you have a toroidal field, it doesn't mean that it exists only on one level. It means it can exist on multiple levels, right? So it has a boundary, but within a boundary it can exist on multiple different scales. Scales are very important in our universe, which is why you can have massive trees of giant proportions in our archaeological records, and then we have the trees that we have today, which is why we have the giant sloth and we have the normal sloth. All right, and we're going to touch upon giants at some point in this series, so you just better prepare for it as well. There's a lot of big stuff and there's a lot of small stuff, and it exists by the same principles, and it exists because of this principle. All right, then when you have a boundary within a boundary, that means that there's infinite ways of dividing up that boundary, right? And that's where fractals come into play. So if you have a scale and you can downside it to a different scale, that's where fractals come in. So that's where you get infinite of creativity, infinitely possibilities, right? All right. And then next up is what you get repeating patterns of divisions, right? If I can divide a space into different ways and shapes and forms, and I can do it again and again and again, that's where you get repeating patterns of division. All right, so you with me so far? All right. Then you can understand how the photon creates a field around itself, how we as humans create a field around ourselves, and you can also understand how it might not only be us that's a connecting field, it might also be that the universe is also has a expanding field, which is what a lot of people say, and it also has a contracting field, and it might just be that they connect up on the outer parts that we cannot see, right? All right, so far I think this is all cookie cutter. If you're having trouble with this, please go check some of Nassim's work. For the intuitive mind, is all very understandable. It's all different scales of different proportions of the same thing. It's all toroidal fields. All right. Then what we can then understand is how a tree, for instance, has a toroidal field. Then we can understand how a Romanesco divides up itself into different shapes and forms at the same principle. And then, of course, there's the question of how these things happen. Well, that's because this knowledge is so universal that it doesn't just exist on Earth, it exists through the entire solar system. And then we can understand that this knowledge is not just located to this particular shape and this particular space, it is also located in across the entire universe, across all times. You know, it's not that we cannot understand it, that it doesn't exist. And, you know, if you're thinking that this was done by people with ropes and flattened boards and all of those things, I mean, you know, there's some serious mathematics that go on preparing something like this, right? This is a very well done and nice crop circle. I mean, is this even a circle anymore? It's a multitude of crop circles, and they exist in a perfect geometric shape. There's no fault in this. What we have to understand is that we didn't only know this. It doesn't just exist in our current reality of today. The ancients knew about this. For instance, in the Osirian in Egypt, there's a flower of life is lasered into the granite. That's right, I said lasered. It's done with some sort of light technology. It's a little bit faint because it has been eroded over some years with light and everything, but it is there. And also underneath the paw of the Gugong in the Forbidden City of China in Beijing, also there's a flower of life. So let's look at those, right? So there you can see it, and it's very clear. The ancients knew about this symbol. And why is it so important that this symbol is important? Well, we're going to dive into that, but it means that they knew that this symbol is the key to understanding of how our space is divided. So, yeah, I'm going to show you some video.
And then you look under the paw, and sure enough, you get the same geometry. And this geometry that I'm talking about is very fundamental, and it is a geometry extrapolated from writing concepts of the structure of space-time that demanded a fundamental geometry that could produce all of the rest of the geometry we see in our universe, in our biology, and in our organization of the universe. And it's based on tetrahedrons. It's a 64 tetrahedron grid.
Take it from a physicist that something like this is true. All right. So if we understand all of this, and we understand that the way of seeing the space is filled up like the flower of life symbol fills up the entire space, and this is like how the pixels, the Planck spheres are structuring our reality, then you can also come to understand that a toroid, it's like a whirlwind. So right, so as you see here on my right, I always point to the wrong direction, but it's there. It's a sphere with a hole in it if you look at it from the top. So if you would want to represent this on a 2D reality, and you would want to have this as a symbol, then what would you end up with? Well, over here on the right we have the pyramidion of the Amenemhat III. Over here on the right we have the pyramidion of Amenemhat III. It's right when you enter into the Cairo Museum. That's the old museum. It's right there in the front. You cannot miss it. And the interesting thing about this pyramid, for instance, is that it has many carvings on it, except the carvings are from different quality. And as we all know, in Egypt, the oldest stuff is the most sophisticated stuff. You know, take it from me, the best quality, the most amazing stuff. How did they do that? That's the oldest stuff. And one of our favorite sponsors of this show, they've been with us from the beginning, so I really like promoting their products because I really think they're quality products. Organicacbd.com. If you need any CBD that you can use to help suppress some pain or some injuries or anything like that, if you've gone through any kind of illnesses or anything where you need some pain relief, try the CBD oil. It can never hurt. It's healthy for you. It's definitely effective. And we also had some people on the show who have actually ordered it, and they're very happy with the quality. So if you ordered some and you're really liking the quality, so please leave a comment down below and let us know if you're happy and satisfied with it. I use it myself. I use it for my dog. She has some little bumps on her back, you know, some elderly bumps and all of these things. And of course, we don't want to have any of that become any more malignant or anything like that. And so I give her CBD oil, and she's a happy camper. She's always with us, and I hope she will be with us for a long, long time. And if she will be, she will definitely be because of organicacbd.com. Go to the website, don't forget the dash, it's organica-cbd.com. Use the code Paradigm Shift because that is where you get your 5% discount, and that is also when you're supporting the show. So if you want to help support a local mom and pop store and you want to help support the show and you also want to support yourself, you need this in your medicine cabinet. So go to organicacbd.com, use the code Paradigm Shift, and then we'll continue back with a regular episode, right? And so let's look at that. So for instance, we have two circular holes here. So we have the one in the middle and we have the one on top. Now, we know that this symbol in Egypt, it represents the sun usually. However, it might not have meant that in the beginning. The winged disc is really something that has been taken over by many different cultures, but it was a solar cultus. So it might not have meant that in the beginning. They might have just understood it as something that is just the essence of what is the beginning of reality, which is a sphere with a dot in it. So let's see what the difference is. So on the right, you can see what the quality is of the carving, and it's much, much better than what the quality is on the top one. So if that is true, that means that all of the other carvings, which is the quality of the circle on the top, if you remove that, you would only end up with the carving of the circle in the middle, and that would mean you would get something like this. So that would be almost the exact middle of the pyramid. If people want to understand where the eye of the pyramid comes from, this is a really good explanation. Now, remember that an eye also has a dot in the middle, right? It's the iris. It's the hole through which all of the light enters into your eye. So very, very important symbology when it comes to the toroidal field. All right, let's continue. So we have the dot. And so if we want to understand how the dot creates the flower of life, then we must understand that it is inevitable that you get the flower of life from the circle with the dot, because it's the only way that you can create another form with equal division. That means from the center of the dot to the external part of the sphere, that is the same distance as you would have to use for the entire spherical placement. So let's do that. So first we put it one on the top, and then we get a cross section, and then we put another one on the cross section, and then we do it again and again and again and again until we get this symbol. And that is the flower of life, ladies and gentlemen. And so we want to see what kind of geometry comes from that. And so let's double it, and then right away we can see this symbol. Now this is an important symbol which we're not going to get into today, because that's not where our route is going to take us today. But it is important to understand that this symbol is a symbol of duality. It is a triangle shape that's going upward, and it's a triangle shape that's going downward. So right away, this symbol, it represents the duality. At the same time, we can get this symbol from it, and this symbol is a good symbol to represent matter, for instance. But the symbol that we're going to focus on today is this one, and that means that it's a wheel, and that's a symbol that represents the dynamic. It represents the circular aspect of this symbology. So when we focus on that and we follow the culture that has taken this symbol as a representative, right away we can understand how they lost the duality. Because if your symbol is only focused on the cyclical nature of it, but you're not focusing on the duality of it, then right away you're losing the aspect of duality. All right, there we go. That's the symbol that we know. Now we're gonna get into that, but first, let's focus on this symbol, because this symbol is the toroidal field in 2D. Now you can see right away we have a 3D representation on the right there, and we have the symbol on the left that is putting geometry in place to understand how the yin-yang symbol is the perfect symbology to understand the toroidal field if you want to incorporate all of its aspects and all of its wisdom in a 2D shape. It keeps the incorporation of the duality, but it also keeps the dynamic part of it. It's constantly fluent, the one is following up on the other, but it is a duality. And it also represents that it has the dot in the middle and it has the center of what it isn't in the middle. And not only that, it also has a hidden third force that most people don't know about. They only know about, well, it's the two opposites, right? But it has a hidden third force, and that force you can see with a white circle. That force is representing balance. So it's very important with the yin and yang symbol that you don't just say, well, it's yin and yang. If I have one thing, then there's the opposite too. What we want to achieve is balance with that. And that it has holistic application. Now, I understand that this might be a little bit difficult to grasp. And so Nassim has done some work and he has made the effort that he can represent how the toroidal form actually exists within the yin-yang symbol. So we're going to have a look at that. There we have the toroid, and then we can see it, and then lines appear. Right? There you have the square, which is interesting. Then a cylinder, and there is where the circles start to form. So one new color in white, one new color in left, and then there's the dot from one side to the other, and it continues to go through the other side. It communicates constantly. And then when you turn it right in the right direction, there you have it. And then what people who practice their life with the yin-yang symbol do is they apply it to everything. From the biggest stuff to the smallest stuff, you have a complete holistic application of it. So for instance, if we have a solar cultist that is trying to apply a certain symbol to himself, then what we're forgetting is that we have a counterculture. So when we have the sun, we will have a moon culture, and it might be hidden somewhere because the sun is visible, but the moon is not always visible. And then the sun exists out of fire, and then the moon, it is very closely associated with water because it moves our water. It doesn't exist out of water, but it has a very big influence on our water. The sun gives us light, and the moon, it is there when it's in the dark. So the light represents consciousness. So what it is that I see, that is actually what I know. And so that means that the other side, it represents the unconsciousness, that which is there, but that what I cannot see. And so this very comes close to our representation of male and female, or some might say masculine or feminine, because, you know, we don't want to get in trouble these days, but yeah, it's a duality and it exists in people. We know that men can often be very rational and women can be very intuitive. And then there's also this thing between hard and soft, right? And there's power in both of them. There's definitely power in being soft, except you don't want to be one thing all the time. You don't want to be hard all the time. You don't want to be soft all the time. And that means that in all of these aspects, we need one thing, and that is balance. All right. So, understanding all of this, then we look at what Western culture has. And then when we look at the oldest civilizations that we have, and even before those old civilizations, for instance, here in a cave in India. This is the Edakar caves in India, and what you can see right there in the middle, you should have some good eyes, but you can see it, it's a 6-spoked wheel, and that wheel is called the Yule. The Yule is, I believe it's also related to the Sanskrit word for wheel. I don't speak Sanskrit, so I cannot pronounce it for you right now, but India is very much connected to the wheels. Some of you ever heard of the chakras? Well, the chakra, that is a wheel. So the ancient Hindus very much think in terms of wheels, wheels of existence. This is even before we think of modern days of when there is a culture in India. Well, you can see this is dated from 10,000 BC to 4,500 BC. That's even before anything is associated with that. But we have also this, and this is from Pakistan. And Pakistan was definitely where the Indus Valley culture was, except this is before the Indus Valley culture. This is 4,000 to 3,500 BC. So that's even before the Indus Valley was actually considered to be a civilization. And then when we actually go into this Indus Valley, that's where we also can see it on a clay tablet seal that is from the Indus Valley symbol. I think this is called the Pashupanita seals from Mohenjo-Daro, and that's actually 2,700 to 2,000 years BC. So here's a close-up that you can see it's a 6-spoked wheel. Now, why is the 6-spoke wheel important for the West? Well, because we have found this manuscript, which is the Oera Linda book. And the Oera Linda book, everything is based on the 6-spoke wheel, even its entire alphabet, which is very closely related to the alphabet that we have today. Its entire alphabet is based upon the 6-spoked wheel. Not only the alphabet, but also the numbers, which supposed to come from Arabic numbers, but the Oera Linda book has them. Not only that, the Oera Linda book has a very close connection with the civilizations in India. And so the ancient people from the Oera Linda, which were mostly female, by the way, they were women, and these women, they kept this secret very close to their knowledge base. And this is also why it was deleted from Western culture, because Western culture before the Romans, before the Greeks, it was attacked many times by invading cultures who brought agriculture and who did all different kind of things. We can see it in the DNA evidence, but they kept their wisdom to themselves because they didn't feel that the people who came in, they were actually knowledgeable with this wisdom. So very important, very interesting, all different connections, and we can almost smell all the false narratives that are in our current history. But just know that all of this is out there, all of this is very well researched. So there's lots of flower of life symbols as well in Europe. There's lots of 6-spoke wheels. They're all across the world. They're represented in Buddhism, they're represented in all different kinds of forms. There's too much that I can show you today in this presentation, but it's very important for the West to understand that this is the 6-spoke wheel, and that's the wheel that keeps turning, the wheel that is also very much related to space. And this is why it is connected to space. So the 6-spoke wheel is connected to space because it has all 6 directions in our 3D reality. It's not just a symbol that represents something, it is something that you can actually see in practice. And this is where we have a connection with the ancient Asian cultures, which also have this same spatial awareness. So let's look at that. Right? So we have the yin and yang, and what most people don't know is that the yin and yang, it exists in 3 forms, and I'm going to explain to you that in a minute. But first, if we have a symbol that represents duality and you want to explain all 6 directions, you only need 3 of them, right? So we have this in the internal and we have this in the external, and of course in the middle we have the balance. So when we look at our martial arts, there's up and down, there's left and right, and there's forward and backward. And so when you see a martial artist move and you see how he has developed all of his movements, you better be sure that all of the 6 directions are incorporated in all of them. And so if we look to the internal part, and for instance we look at the I Ching, we see that it's also divided into 3 parts. So we have heaven, we have human, and we have the earth, which is logical because this again incorporates the toroidal field, right? We have all of that is above us, all of that is below us, and we have ourselves. Now, not only this is also a deeper understanding of what is the macrocosmos and what is the microcosmos. The macrocosmos is everything that is outside of us, and the macrocosmos is everything that is inside of us. And that is how the ancient Chinese in the I Ching understood all of this together. Then continuing back to the West, because in the West we also have a symbol for the toroidal field, and it still lives on in the Norse mythology, and it's called the Yggdrasil, and it's a tree. Now if you want to have a symbol for a toroidal field, the tree is the perfect one because it has all of its leaves at the top and it has all of its roots at the bottom. And so the Yggdrasil as a symbol is also very much connected to duality. For instance, the Yggdrasil, it is a symbol for the eternal, but at the same time it's also constantly under threat. It represents growth, but it also represents decay on the other part. And it represents rebirth and it represents death. It represents the cosmos and it represents Earth. And so this is all of it, but it also has an axis mundi, which is the trunk of the tree, which is the axis on which the Earth moves. It spins around itself, it spins a web of light. And the web, it is created by the 3 Normir. And the Normir, who are the Normir? Well, the Normir are these 3 deities. They're often seen as female deities, and they represent the past, the present, and the future. And they spin. They spin the thread, they spin the web, and where do they spin the web on? They spin it on the spinning wheel of time, right? And they are weaving the fate of all beings. They're spinning it on the wheel of time, and everything is interconnected. Then going back to the east, we want to look at the origin of the yin-yang. Well, this is the first representation of a yin-yang symbol that I can find. Now, you might disagree with this, but please, if you disagree, let me know where you have found an earlier symbol of yin-yang so I can adjust my theory. This is where I found it. It's in the Cucuteni Triptylian culture, and they have artifacts like this. And this specific artifact, it has a yin-yang symbol on it. Now, this is found in modern Ukraine. I'm going to say that again. This is found in modern Ukraine. Now, for all of you people who are lacking in your geological knowledge, let me pull up a map. This is a map of Asia. Now, this on the left is where Ukraine is, and on the right, that is where the I Ching is supposed to have been founded. Now, the dates also, they're very far apart. The Cucuteni Triptylian culture is around 4000 BC, while the I Ching is supposed to be written around 2000 BC. So there's 2000 years in between. Very interesting. Another partner that we're really happy to be affiliated with is blueearthinnovations.com. They have fantastic products. I mean, if you haven't seen our episode yet with Frank Colaris and what fantastic products he makes this fantastic water that he calls Elixir, which it has two of the most strongest vibrations encoded in it. It has the message of love and gratitude in it. And with that, he can clean up all of the water. Now, this is not any type of fiction. This is actually real. I have a water vitalizer, and with that, if you can stream your water through this for 18 hours, it will actually be purified. It does not require filters. It does not eat electricity. It is just a concept that works, and it works with the natural flow of life. And so if you want to vitalize your water, if you want to upgrade the energy of your water, you need one of these in your life. And if you cannot afford this, I have a friend of mine who says, well, I already have a water purifier, so I wouldn't need this. Well, you might have that, but is your water actually structured? Well, that is where the eggs come into play. So he has these little eggs, he fills them with this water, he puts them in a epoxy resin, which is beautiful. It's a really nice product, and these are only 28 euros a piece, I think. You can order them at blueearthinnovations.com. You can just put them in your water filter, or if you actually want to buy one of these has 4 of these eggs already inside of them. So if you need any of these products in your life, and I seriously recommend that you do, go to blueearthinnovations.com, use the code Paradigm Shift, you get a 5% discount. Not only that, you're helping support us this show, you get the best structured water that you can get out there, you get the cleanest water. So I seriously recommend that you need those Blue Earth Innovation products in your life. So please go check them out at the web shop, use the code Paradigm Shift, and we'll continue back to this episode. Moving on, we continue with the Sun Cross. Now, or as I like to call it, the other Yule, because it is also a wheel. It is also understood as a wheel. Now, if you want to know more about this, then check out our Christmas episode, because we talked about how the ancient Yule fest is the origin of our Christmas festivities, because it's called a Yule fest, and they celebrated it on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, or you could say the longest night of the year, which is opposite from the longest day of the year or the shortest night of the year. And in the middle you have the 2 solstices, which means equal day as equal night. Okay, so there's different interpretations of this, and this symbol has been in use for a long time, so there's at least a couple of different interpretations. One of them is, for instance, the one that I just said, which translates to our modern summer, winter, spring, and autumn system. And you can see why the longest day is at the top and the shortest day is at the bottom. Now, when you understand this in the 4 elements, so you have air at the top, you have earth at the bottom, so you get an opposite axis there. And then you also get water and fire, which is an extra axis of opposites. And then lastly, what eventually happened is we can see it as a compass, which is north, south, west, and east. And so therefore we have already 3 fundamental ways on looking upon what the Yule means. So it means time in the first interpretation, it means the elements in the second interpretation, so all of the elements combined, and it means earth in the last interpretation. Now, if all of these interpretations are correct, then why is it called the Sun Cross? Well, and that has to do with an invasion, because over here you can see an invasion of where it is actually incorporated in the winged sun disk. So you can see it in the Anglo-Saxon area, which is in Western Europe. You can also see it in the Persian area, which is in Iran. And what you can see on the bottom is the Hittites, which is in modern day Turkey, and that doesn't have the 4-spoked wheel, it has the 6-spoked wheel. So not only have they done it with the 4-spoked wheel, they have done it with the 6-spoked wheel as well. Very interesting, and that is how we know that the sun worshippers, they were an expansive people, and they invaded the native cultures and they adapted their symbology to their own belief system. Now, how do we know that this was all across the world? Well, because you can see them all across the world. So here's a couple of them. You can see Poland, you can see France, you can even see the Ningxia, which is very close to Siberia. It's a very old one, so it might even be a much older symbol. It's on the grease pots. it is definitely on the Triptilian culture. It's in, well, you cannot see it right now. Let me just clear that. Peru, it was all across the world. It's in Utah in the USA, it's in Mongolia. So it comes from a people that were very expansive, that traveled all across the world, and it developed into different ways all across the world, right? So if you're one of those people who say that the people always stayed in one place and then they never migrated anywhere, look into your history. It's definitely the case that all of the people traveled everywhere in the past. So we just looked at the Triptilian culture and where we have the first yin-yang symbol. And if we look within the Triptilian culture, we can also see a devolution of the yin-yang symbol. So by a miracle, it survived in Asia, but it definitely went through phases of devolution within the Triptilian Cucuteni culture itself. So we have this symbol, which is unmistakably a yin-yang symbol in the Triptilian Cucuteni culture. And when it continues to devolve over time, you can still see that it has the loss of its two opposites. You can see that the symbol, it changes a little bit, and it definitely is not the exact symbol anymore, and it kind of reforms and it loses the way that the opposites are involved, connected with each other. And then the eyes, you can see the eyes of, they call them the eyes of snakes, or they call them the whatever you like to call them, but the dots in the middle, they drift, they go away, they go to the sides in this particular culture. So you get a new kind of tradition based upon it. And then all of a sudden you get a loss of the eye. So in the middle one you see the white part, it gets thicker, but the eyes are now gone. And then later on you can see in the middle of this phase where it's just the two opposite swirls. And so this all is within what they call the old European culture, the old Cucuteni Triptilian culture. We can see that we go all the way from the laws of two opposites all the way to the idea of two spiraling energies within each other. So we have lost a whole bunch of context in between. And not only that, I believe that somewhere along the devolution of this culture, they were traveling across the world. I think these are the people who brought the different symbols to all of the world, right? So why do I think that? Well, because of this. Here we can see some examples. For instance, here we can see, for example, in the Moche culture in northern Peru, we can see the loss of duality in one symbol. So first you can see the perfect light and dark spiral, and then all of a sudden it turns into a dark spiral on a white background, and it turns into a white spiral on a dark background. And then in Majaro, Brazil, you can see that even though it still has the duality of the two opposing forces, all of a sudden it loses one of the forces. It almost turns into a thinner spiral. So it's definitely like a devaluation over time. Then in Newgrange in the UK, we have, for instance, we have these spirals, and we still have two spirals and they're connected. So they belong together and they're opposing spirals. So it's one side goes one way and the other side goes the other way. It's a very good understanding, a good concept of how it works. And then next up, for instance, is we have in Malta, which still has two spirals, but they're not connected. And then in Arizona, for instance, in the national park, there's a very interesting area where you can see a dual spiral and a single spiral all together. And then eventually, amongst others, in the Greek culture, but all other cultures surrounding that area as well, especially in Europe, we finally end up with a single spiral symbol. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is how our symbols have devolved over time. And this is the Greek era. And so imagine what we have lost after that the Romans conquered Europe, after what the Christian Empire did with the book burnings and with the Second World Wars, all of the information that was lost back then, we have a lot of lost information in the European continent. And over time, we have lost everything. But with the connection between the East and the West, we can finally bring it together with our understanding of how our universe actually works. I hope this presentation was very informative for you. If you like this video, please hit a thumbs up, hit a subscribe button. Also, don't forget to visit our sponsors, which is organica-cbd.com and blueearthinnovations.com. Use the code ParadigmShift. You're supporting good businesses, you're supporting the show, and you're supporting yourself by getting a better life, by getting these products. Lastly, we also have a Patreon account. If you're interested in supporting us, go to patreon.com/paradigmshift for you, because we're making this for you. And lastly but not least, please, if you're watching this, hit that subscribe button, because we really want to get to that 1,000 subscribers where we can actually get some YouTube income, right? All of the little bits help us support this, because we want to make this a self-sustaining show so we can keep producing more quality content from you and bring you all the things from the past. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.